Look forward to seeing Braden Narveson miss 2 of 3 field goals or make all of his field goals in London or in Brazil. All right, so you're the punting professor. That's what we used to tease you about because you kept all the hang times and everything else. But you pay close attention to the specialists, and we're going to talk to Rich Bisaccia later today. What was your takeaway for where they now landed at kicker?
As Matt LaFleur said, that's a question for Rich. Boy, did he avoid that one, right? Look, we watched them all, right? We watched how many, what do they have, 4 or 5 different kickers here throughout the course of the spring, and none of them was like, oh, this guy's great. Now, Greg Joseph had a stretch early on where you thought, ooh, okay, this is what an NFL kicker should look like. And, then he ran into a patch in the middle of camp where he was terrible. He was barely 50% for like 2 or 3 practices. It's just, if you can't do it in practice, which should be the lowest pressure setting that you're in, and it's a little bit like, hitting balls on the driving range, you're kind of getting in a little bit of a rhythm. I mean, they didn't go like 10 in a row, but they'd alternate one guy. So you should be able to get into a little bit of rhythm. And they just didn't. That was, to me, a hugely troubling sign. I will say this. About 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago, I can't remember. It was going to the last preseason game. I did some looking around, and the name that kept coming up from people was this Narveson guy. And I, to be honest, had no idea. I didn't know much about him. But someone said keep an eye on him because the Titans are probably going to keep Nick Folk. And, you look at his college stats, and he was no better than what these guys were, in practice and what they were last season. Now, he did have a good preseason, 6 out of 7, made a 59-yarder, made a game winner against Seattle, made both of his extra points, but it's such a small sample size that, I guess on the one hand, you give Gutekunst credit for not settling. On the other hand, you kind of wonder, well, why did it take so long, or is this even the right option? And are they still in a bad spot?
So, Rob, is the Rich Bisaccia luster worn off? Because when you listen to that press conference yesterday, seems like somebody's a little irritated with because Bisaccia has had a lot of say in personnel, and it looks like that is waning as Goody made his cuts with some of his core special teams guys and obviously the kicker that he wanted drafted last year.
Well, look, I've always said, Tausch, that I thought just because you're a good special teams coach doesn't mean you're a good kicking coach. To me, I think those are 2 different things. And they have coaches for everything now. I'm so surprised that they have not done that. I did get a text from a former kicker in the NFL who I will not name, but said that Bisaccia may be a good special teams coach, but maybe he's not good at evaluating and or teaching kickers. Because those are 2 different things. The scheme is one thing, and I think Rich has done a really good job in that regard. And I don't know if he's a good kicking coach or not a good kicking coach, but all these guys have specialists, right? I mean, Alex Hale works with John Carney. There's the Jamie Cool kicking school. All these guys, there's a number of former kickers around the country that run kicking schools, and maybe they make more money doing that, and it's less work than they would if they were hired by a team. But in this day and age where they have coaches for everything and assistant position coaches and assistant to the assistant position coach, I'm really surprised that they don't have a kicking specialist coach on staff.
Well, it's good to know that you heard from Ryan Longwell. All right, so I'm curious when you look at where this team is at. I brought this up the other day with you. This Goody said we've got in 2022 we've got a championship team, and when you have a championship team, you need to have a championship level kicker. This could be, and Matt LaFleur mentioned it too, right? He's had seasons where it was a revolving door at kicker on other staffs that he was on. So I don't want to make this into something bigger than it is. I don't know if Narveson will be the answer. He very well could be, right? Yeah. Ryan Longwell was the answer. He turned out to be a fantastic kicker, and he was a guy that the 49ers cut and Ron Wolf spent $100 picking him up off the waiver wire.
And remember, he missed one. It was the opener at Philly.
Philly.
He missed an opener. I think the conditions might not have been great, if I remember right. 97, I guess that was.
Your first year.
Early on, and I mean, they could have dumped him at that point, and been on a revolving door. So, and I guess I bring that up because just because he misses one or makes a bunch early, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what his path is. I mean, Anders Carlson was lights out for the first 6-7 weeks. This last year. I just think, it was an interesting, and you could play press conference interpretation games all you want, but it was interesting how on the one hand, Goody admitted that he's not very patient with specialists, and on the flip side, he didn't learn anything. I shouldn't say learn anything. That's not the right way to say it, but he admitted that he's not patient, and then he continued to not be patient, if that makes sense.
Right. And you bring up a really good point about Anders Carlson. I think he made his first, including extra points, like his first 16 or 17 kicks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now he's not employed anymore. I'm just, that admission and bringing up J.K. Scott, just as I was talking about with Tausch earlier, that just underscores that if you give up on him now, there's a good chance he'll turn out to be good for somebody else. And that confession, again, we'll see if that ends up being an issue. So if it's not kicker, if it's not Malik Willis, if it's not swing tackle, what is it about this team that fans should be nervous about? Because when in the grand scheme of things, the kicker thing is big, in my opinion. The other stuff, it's kind of first world champagne problems for a football team that's got a lot of really good talent on it.
Right, and like how many teams can afford to lose their starting quarterback for any significant length of time and still be okay? I mean, I guess it depends on the type of injury. I mean, there were Scotty Tolzien and those guys tried to keep the Packers afloat, and they did just barely, right? That in 2013 when Rodgers got hurt, and in 2017 they weren't able to do it, right? I mean, I guess they sort of kept them in it. Brett Hundley kept them in it a little bit, but it's hard. It's hard no matter. It's just the nature of this game. But I think if you look at the rest of this team, to me, it's pretty solid from 1 to 45 or however many there, 1 to 44 or whatever it is if you take the kicker and the backup quarterback out for the players that are going to be active on game day. I did hear at the end of your segment you guys talking a little bit about offensive line issues. They don't necessarily maybe have a number 3 swing tackle amongst those guys that you mentioned, but maybe their number 3 tackle is Elton Jenkins, and then whoever doesn't start between Sean Ryan and Jordan Morgan goes in and plays Jenkins' spot at guard, and you can sustain one injury there. Can they sustain 2? I don't know. That's another issue. There are years where you go through a whole season and you start the same offensive line combination, 14 out of 17 weeks, and it's not that big of a deal. And then there's other years where you've had 9 or 10 different combinations. I'm sure Tausch, I'm sure you were part of both of those different scenarios. And,
Rob, don't you think because they kept Dillard, he's going to be their swing tackle? You're not keeping him if you're not going to play him.
Yeah, you would think that if there's an injury in game that he would go in.
Yep.
You wonder, though, if there's an injury and it's, they have a week to prepare, which way they go, I guess. And that's why I say maybe they would go with Jenkins, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. Maybe it's in game they go Jenkins, and if they have a week to prepare, it's Dillard. I don't know, but I do think keeping Dillard gives them options. And Dillard seemed like he was better as camp went on. Now he ended up getting hurt, and we didn't see him at the end, but he was not very good early. There's no question about that.
Well, and Rob, what did you make of what Matt LaFleur had to say about A.J. Dillon? Because I think some people thought he was going to be a bubble guy, and obviously his injury has more than likely ended his career in Green Bay. What did you make of how that scenario played out? Were you surprised?
Yeah, I mean, I don't – sounds like if you just go back, it sounds like he wasn't a bubble guy because it sounds like they had plans for him, right? They thought he was going to be a significant part of the offense. And, it's just anytime you're dealing with the neck thing, it's just like, I mean, I feel for guys that have any injury, but boy, that's hard. That's life-changing stuff potentially there. So, I think that's just a tough situation. It would have been really interesting, though, to see if A.J. Dillon could have sort of turned it around a little bit. I mean, all the work he put into, changing his body and sort of accepting, that he had not lived up to, maybe his own expectations even the last couple of years. It would have been interesting to see what kind of a bounce back year he could have had. But the reality is, they have Josh Jacobs, who's never played it down for them, but obviously is a very, very accomplished running back. And then you have a rookie who missed almost all of training camp in Marshawn Lloyd. And then you had a guy who last year was kind of the training camp feel-good story in Emmanuel Wilson and did some nice things in the game that he got, and then he ends up getting hurt with the shoulder injury, and that sort of derailed his rookie year. So maybe, just maybe, that this is the time or the year or at least the start of the season where they finally do what they never did with Aaron Jones, and that's give one running back a bunch of touches.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Rob, before we let you go, I want to put you on the spot a little bit with this. There's been times when things are contentious between Tausch and me. You and I don't think we've ever really been contentious. You've been contentious with more than your share of people. But I am curious. Yes, you turned over a new leaf. So you're sitting at Jason Hogue's house, and you and Madsen and Hogue and Wes Hodkowitz are playing poker. You would want Matt LaFleur there, right? Because he can't hide anything. He's clearly pissed about where the kicking situation is. Yeah. And I don't know how much he and Goody talk, but did you walk out of there going, whew, the head coach does not hide his feelings well when something is not the way he wants it, right?
Yeah, I'm not folding when LaFleur's betting big with 2-7 under his hands. There's no question about that. Trying to bluff everybody off the table. But what did McCarthy used to say, right? Conflict is good. I don't know if conflict in the media is good and doing it that way, but look, it's one of the challenges of this business, and it doesn't matter how you structure it. People can say, well, this is. This would be better if Goody was his boss and they weren't both reporting to Murphy and maybe not. But I just think these are their personalities, and you learn to work with people, based on their personality. And I mean, heck, I had to work with Wes for a couple of years at the Press Gazette. Sometimes it was hard to hide my disappointment. Like the time I berated him in the newsroom because Jim Mora had called me, and Wes didn't get a number for me to call him back at. So, sometimes you just have to live with those people.
Well, we will see what they live with from a kicking perspective. But Matt LaFleur, the way he answered, he cut me off, which is usually a good idea given how long my questions are. But when I started when I started to say about the Razors' edge difference in winning and losing, I'm well aware. Was his quick retort. So we will see.
Reminded me of the George Costanza. I am aware. You have lost a lot of hair. I am aware.
Rob, we love it when you join us. We appreciate you. Thanks.
All right, we'll see you next week.